might actually do the thing.
Think we might. We might do the thing.
I have an inkling.
You guys, I think we might do the thing. Or maybe we're already doing the thing.
Oh!
That's how we're opening this.
There's no countdown. There's no 3, 2, 1. Just hits
right
record.
Oh, well, here we go. This is how we're opening it.
All right.
All right.
Who wants to do the welcome?
It's your deal, dude.
Shit, I guess I am recording, huh?
It's your deal.
Yeah. Go
Hello and welcome to Speech Bubbles, a webcomic podcast by people who do webcomics for people who like and also want to do webcomics. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm used to being first, I guess. Bite Ghost, Amber. I do make the webcomic Backlash.
And I am Jeff, or Ottakun, and I do the webcomic Firearm with a Y.
With a Y. It's very important.
That's so important.
And I'm Brent, also known as NeonJawbone currently, and I do the webcomic Paradise. And you can find all of these webcomics on the webcomic hosting site Tapastic. So, this is our kind of first episode, so it's going to be a little goofy, but I think we're going to work through it once we get to the actual talking points. We wanted to do a webcomic podcast because webcomics kind of put you at this interesting Venn diagram of being a comic creator and an online content creator, which I think puts you at an interesting spot to talk about things from a very unique perspective. And today, I think we're going to make our first episode about starting a webcomic. A murmur of agreement from my co-host.
It's just a while since I've started a webcomic.
It's been a while since I think we're all about a year and a half. Yeah.
Talking about.
Well, you had solid updates for a good almost year, right?
No. Maybe like half a year. Maybe like 4 months of the year.
Man,
But
what do you consider, like, when are you done starting your webcomic? What's the timeline? 5 years into it, I'm finally started.
When I actually have a full chapter done, then I'll say I'm started. Damn it.
you got the prologue done.
Yeah, that's
There's no
true.
small feat.
Alright, that's fair. That is fair. That did take some time.
But we've all had webcomics like around for over a year, and so what are some things you would tell people who are thinking about starting their webcomic right absolutely now? Some
Oh shit.
should we start with do's and don'ts?
Wow.
Don'ts of webcomics. Well, the first one that anyone will ever tell you when you say, "Oh, I want to start my webcomic, but I don't know if what I should do first," and people always will come banging pots and pans. Don't start with your long 10-year project. Don't start with that one. It'll kill you. But like, the truth is, everybody does that. Like,
We're all doing that.
we're all
literally
doing that.
every single one of our comics is gonna take between plus 5 to 10 years to complete.
Mm-hmm. And it's the first one too. Baby's first webcomic. Gonna take a long time. And
Boy.
I just think it's important, a really important thing to know with doing webcomics and producing them for free on the internet for people to consume is it is kind of tough. It's kind of a tough life to live, but the most important thing is that you need to be your biggest fan. That's the biggest, most important thing, because if you are not totally in love with what you're doing, then it's going to be really hard when you hit that year mark and you're not done with the prologue yet. And you don't feel like people are reading it. You need to have it so that you need to be telling the story that you want to see, through thick and thin. You need to be excited about it.
I think that's that's like a big thing, especially with starting it. I have friends and stuff who like they want to start a webcomic, but they're not sure if the idea that they want to go with is the one that they want to marry themselves to for years and years, possibly. And I think it's like normal to have those sort of doubts, but I also think like if the doubts are overwhelming your like hype about your own idea, then that it's gonna be like really difficult to stick it out. Yeah, it's gonna kill the magic a little bit.
You can get burnt out.
I also see I see people, they'll complain, or like they'll have a mindset of they do love their idea, they love it so much, but they don't want to make it their first because they know that as they make comics they'll get better at it, so they want to save that idea they're in love with for like a future idea when they're better at making comics. But then like if you do that, isn't that just kind of pushing away like new better ideas that could be coming later? Like you're like you're saving that because that's your best idea and you're never going to be able to make something better, you know?
Oh yeah, like, but that actually happened with me. Before I started Firearm, I actually was working on another webcomic many years ago, and it didn't get very far. Didn't even get to 10 pages, but I still liked that idea so much. I'm like, you know what? I need to get better at comics in general before I even try. And that's when I told myself I'm going to make a smaller webcomic. But the problem is that comic turned into something I actually loved a bit more, and then now I'm doing that. So it really does kind of become that issue. And I think the best way to go about it is just find something that you know that you're going to love to draw for like hours, weeks, months, years even. Like you need to be in love with that comic to keep going.
That's really
never be, like, super good.
That's a really good segue into what I think is a next good talking point on the subject is how did you guys go about starting like physically starting your comic, and what were some things you were thinking about at that time? I know it was like years now, but
years in the past, back when I was in high school.
Put yourself in baby used shoes. What were some stuff when you were starting out? You're starting your webcomic.
Well, I actually had a previous version of my comic. This current run of Backlash is the second try. I had like a chapter and a half. I had like 40-something pages back in 2012. I did it like half traditionally because I didn't have a tablet. And I didn't know anything about the plot. I just really liked my characters a lot, and I really wanted to draw them in a comic. And I was inspired by other webcomics. I was like, I can do that. Like they just make their webcomic. I can do that. So baby me doesn't know anything about comics. I started it, and then I got to a point where I was like, I don't actually have a plot for this yet. Like I have all the characters. Like the characters are all the same. They've all been around for a really long time. But I scrapped it. I stopped, and I took like a year and a half where I was just like focusing on world building and like figuring out what the conflict is and what the plot is, and that's where my villains finally figured out what they are and stuff. And then I started it back up again in like 2014, I think. And that was hard too. Like even when I started totally digitally, I know how to draw now. I still wasn't very good at comics. I did not have a consistent update schedule. Like I tried, but it's hard when you're not used to doing it. And now, the good year of 2017, overcame.
I think that's something a lot of people who are doing that like 10-year dream project comic did is I see a lot of people on Twitter talk, there's like always a shitty version of the webcomic they're doing now. I think that's important. There's like
there was a bad version at one point. Like it wasn't just the good version you see now. Like there are hidden dark secrets.
I think that's the caveat to like don't start with your dream project. I think is like if you are gonna start with your dream project, know when to start over. Know when to be like, oh wait, I should do this different.
And also, and like know that it's okay to start over. Like there is like a do's and don'ts list of like don't keep redrawing your pages, don't keep restarting. It's okay to be bad, but like sometimes when you're like, wow, that was really bad. Let's do it over again. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just don't get stuck in the cycle of starting over again.
You don't want to be like a person who's been doing the same 10 pages of their prologue for like 8 years and be like, this time it's going to be perfect. It's like,
It's never going to get told.
That is actually how I start out.
Yeah,
no kidding. I did. I spent like a good, I think, year, maybe a year and a half, trying to actually figure out what I wanted to do. And that's like when my story went through the most changes. The story would change from something longer, something bigger, something more bombastic, then eventually to smaller things. And then the character designs changed. Like I don't know how many people actually know this, and they would only probably know if they followed my work for about that long period of time. And that's Robbie used to be a fucking furry. She was a cat. And that cat was a dude who wore a gas mask and just pants. Just big bright orange pants. And like that was the biggest change, I think. That's when things shifted the most. And that's where it's kind of not necessarily stopped changing, but made a bit more of a slow incline to change. And that was a very good point in time to learn everything I know now, I think. You learn a lot when you start over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely say that for sure.
You also learn a lot when you just start, though. I know a lot of the things I know about how I personally like to make and draw comics now, specifically because I dove straight into Paradise without really super thinking about it. And I wasn't, I went to college and I was like, I want to make comics. And what that really meant was like, I read Shonen Jump a whole bunch when I was in high school and was like, I want to do that. And then I met some people in college that were like, there's more to comics than this. And they were really formative in helping kind of open my eyes to like the wider scope of comics. Like I only just started getting into print comics and actually webcomics only in the like past 2 or 3 years maybe. Meanwhile I have like 60 something volumes of One Piece on my shelf right now. And like 7 years of I was subscribed to Shonen Jump literally until they went digital. I have like 2 whole tote boxes full of Shonen Jump just sitting in storage right now. Yeah. It's so much paper. But yeah, I knew I wanted to do comics, and I don't actually remember how I landed on webcomics specifically. I think I was just like, this is a step, obviously. People putting their comics online for free. That sounds like a thing people who want to make comics would do, and it is.
I certainly I don't like. I think this is actually an interesting point because I would like actually to know where you guys started reading comics. Like you said that you started with Shonen Jump, right? Mm-hmm. Was that it, or did you read anything else before then?
Oh well, I started. My dad would buy me like little comics from the store sometimes when I was like a little small baby child. I'd have really vivid memories of the Pokemon manga that came out. I have vivid memories of like an issue of Thor where he fights the Juggernaut, and like a Godzilla comic. And then I think at one point he got me, I don't know if either of you guys have heard of Dragon Knights, which I think was done by Clamp, maybe? Yeah, might have been Clamp. It looks like Clamp. And that was the first like manga I ever read. It was like about these like 3 guys who were knights and they had dragons, and it was kind of simple, but I remember liking it a lot. And that kind of segued into other stuff. And it was pretty much just manga for like that. Like I seriously, like, I don't think I bought a print comic until my like sophomore, junior year of college.
What about you, Ember?
Batman. Straight up.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's me. In junior high. Well, okay. The first comics I read, can't really give like big graphic novel Batman comics to little babies because they're kind of scary. So my first comics that I read were my older sister. She was really into Sergeant Frog.
Yeah.
And Tsubasa. Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle by Clamp was the first comic I read. And I was obsessed with it. It's really good. I was like, what is this? What is this nonsense? And it was amazing. And it got me into that actually helped me get me into drawing, period. Like, I didn't want to do comics from that. I just wanted to learn how to draw the pretty people. And then I got really into Batman like a year later, and my sister bought me the first graphic novel I ever read was The Killing Joke, and I was obsessed with it. And then she bought me Hush, which I was like, oh, this was actually better than that. This was way better than that one. And so I just had slowly, my whole graphic novel, my comic shelf is mostly like, it's like I have Tsubasa and One Piece, which that came after Batman. One Piece came after Batman, and I got obsessed with that. And my friend sold me the first 10 volumes of One Piece for like $5 because she didn't want them anymore. I was like, yes, give me those. And then so it's just those two series, and then I have a lot of Batman because I was like, I like comics, I just really like Batman. And it's actually only been in the last like few years that I've been like focusing on like trying to get more like one-shot standalone novels, and that I got really into webcomics and stuff. So that's my journey, I guess.
How about you, Jeff?
Okay. I actually, this is actually pretty interesting in comparison because you both kind of got introduced to manga a lot earlier than I did. I actually started with the comic strips in the newspaper that my grandma would like save for me every Sunday.
Oh, that's super cute. What?
I know. And I read that, and I remember when I used to go to the library, I would actually like always go to the comic section. Like I would go read Tintin and Garfield, and just like mostly the strip comics, but eventually started breaking out into more Marvel comics and whatnot. But I didn't actually read manga until like I think my mid-teens, when I actually started learning more about them and getting into things like anime and whatnot. But I also actually got into webcomics a lot earlier too, because when I was when I was like 13, I remember this. Like I first moved here to Wisconsin, and I did not really have any friends. I didn't really go out and about. I just kind of like stayed at home and sat on the computer, and I would find webcomics. Mostly they were, back in the olden days, the sprite comics, where everyone just had game sprites, and they would just put them in situations and tell stories with them. And then eventually moved on to things like, I think it was like Snafu. I think I remember reading a lot of Snafu when I was growing up, and oddly, I think I did stumble upon Cucumber Quest at one point, but I don't know, I didn't really read a lot of big name comics until the more recent years when I started getting into it more. Yeah.
I don't think I actually read webcomics until I was starting a webcomic.
Oh,
I think I had that might not be true. I think I'd maybe read Vibe at that point. No, I'd read Nimona. I think the first webcomic I'd ever read was Nimona, by it's like Noelle Stevenson, I think. And then basically I was like, I think I remember actually really posting about it. I was like, oh man, so I'm looking for webcomic recommendations because I don't actually read a lot of web. I might have actually started Paradise before I read more than 2 or 3 webcomics. It's like, well, I'm in the shit now. What are some other ones doing this thing that I'm doing? And I think have saved on my phone a huge list of recommendations that I think actually both of you might have contributed to at some point, for sure.
The first webcomic I ever read. Oh, I like read webcomics, but I didn't really put together that like that was a thing. You know, like I read webcomics that were online, but I didn't think like, oh, this is like a form of storytelling. It was just like, this is how I get my jokes. First webcomic I ever read, 8-Bit Theater. Sprite comic with Final Fantasy sprites. It was the height of hilarity to young me. And then I think the only other ones I like read before I like, let me think. I read Looking for Group, which is like a fantasy one. It's kind of similar to 8-Bit Theater actually. And I read Dr. McNinja. I follow Mod Mad, who does The Property of Hate, and that webcomic, I like was there when that like started, and so then that inspired me to make my own comic. I was like, oh, that's a thing. People can just make webcomics. They can just publish comics online. They can just do that. You don't have to go to school for this. And I was like, I can draw kind of. I can do this. And yeah, it is only kind of recently that I've started like. Webcomics are kind of the main form of comics that I consume now because they're free.
Yeah,
and also good, and like they're free and good and more varied than what you can find in print.
Yeah,
a lot of times.
You're not restricted by a lot of the kind of like rules and regulations, quote unquote.
Stuff. So people can just make the stories and the characters that they want to make, and so I'm like, I'm spoiled. Webcomics spoil me. We got a little detracted from the starting your webcomic comic.
I think talking about
I was asked.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just mostly asking that because it's actually important what you draw from, because I think what you grow up with is kind of what not necessarily cements the idea of what kind of comics you're going to probably be interested in or want to make, but it kind of does influence where you're gonna probably go. And it's also something to look back on.
100%. I wanted to make a story. The first comic I ever made was a fan comic for One Piece. It was a fanfic fan comic for One Piece. It's really good, by the way. It's really good.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that.
But because I really loved One Piece, and I wanted to make a story kind of like that, where it's like, oh, anything can happen, and like it's just a crazy adventure of friendship, and you know, blah blah blah. And then I actually remember I read an interview. Oh crap! I forgot his name. The guy who makes Hellboy.
Oh, Magnola.
Oh,
yeah, Magnola. I read. Yeah, okay. So I forgot his name. A shame. But I read an interview with him, and one time he was just like, he basically says, yeah, with Hellboy, I wanted to make a universe where anything could happen, so that I won't get bored with my own story. Where okay, I'm bored of drawing zombies, let's do vampires, let's do aliens, like he just wanted to have a universe where anything could happen and anything could exist. And I was like, whoa, you can do that? And it blew my mind. And so that's what Backlash is just that now. It's just my universe where I can do whatever the heck I want.
I do like that though, because I never know what to expect.
It's true. Like, it's absolutely true. I think the first comics I ever drew were like in those sketchbooks that look like leather-bound books a little
Moleskine.
bit. Yeah, but the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Large Moleskine.
I drew like dumb like superpower school that were like simultaneously like Naruto and One Piece ripoffs. I drew like a pirate comic. There was always like bad self-inserts of me and my friends at the time. Yeah, the staple of anyone. Then you'd go to school and be like, hey, look at this comic that I drew that we're in. They'd be like, oh, sweet. And that'd be the thing. And then eventually, a couple years later, you look back and it's like, oh, no, I thought this was so cool. Oh, man.
But the good thing, like the point is that it made you happy.
Yeah. That's a really
and
important thing.
And you were drawing. And that's the other important thing. You were drawing and you were happy doing it, and that's the point.
Yeah. Things to keep in mind.
Actually, speaking about making sure that you draw things so that you never really get bored and things that you actually like doing. One thing I think that's definitely important about making a webcomic before you do all that is that you should definitely have your story mostly set out and make sure it's something you like. Yeah, that's a problem I ran into a lot. Rewrites after rewrites after rewrites.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good, something you need to kind of work out, iron out a little bit. Not to the point, I think, of where it's like, oh yes, this is perfect. I don't need to change anything ever again, because that's kind of boring,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no.
I like. Yeah, like Amber, you do something fairly similar, right?
Oh yeah, like
loose outline.
Oh yeah, like I have bullet points for like this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen, but like everything in between is just kind of like we'll see what happens when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't script anything until the chapter of. I take everything a chapter at a time.
Yeah.
So like I have like a vague premise for what needs to happen in every chapter, but like I don't know exactly how it's going to go down until I sit down to script it. And I think that keeps me excited for it because it's like, oh, look at this thing I just wrote, sitting on it for years.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a stale idea in my head because it's new to me too, and I'm excited to share.
Yeah, exactly.
But I know some
actually
people.
kind of did that.
Oh, you did?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I learned a lot about webcomics from you, man. Like.
Oh shucks. I know that there's no one right way to start or like plan or do a webcomic either. Like some people, they're like, I've had this entire plot scripted for 30 years and I know exactly what's going to happen at every single beat of my story. And I'm like, and it's still good. So good for you. Like works for you. But like I get bored of stuff really easy. So I have to like keep things a surprise for myself.
I think, yeah, like knowing how you work on stuff specifically is really good to keep in mind. Because like you said, I also have some friends who are like, I'm not going to start until I know, because I have to know every single detail of everything that happens in my comic. And then I have, I think we're all more of a mindset where it's like, if you have an end in mind and some big events that you need to happen, you just work towards that, and all the stuff in the middle is a little bit of improv. Or you could be like me in late 2014 and be like, I'm just going to start and we'll figure out an ending eventually. And I didn't know where my comic was going until 6 months into the comic. I was blessed with probably a particularly vague prologue, but things were in constant shifting and changing for those first 6 months because the back half, I was inspired by shonen stuff, so I was just like, well, what's gonna happen is she's just gonna like fight an enemy, and then she's gonna fight another enemy, and then she's gonna fight the biggest enemy, and then the comic's gonna be over.
True shonen style.
And it sort of still is gonna follow that, but a lot of stuff has changed.
Mm-hmm. I think that I'm like in awe of people who can they're like, I'm not going to start my comic until I know about it. And they actually can like get to a point where like, all right, now I can start. Because when they say I'm not going to start my comic until I know everything about it, I'm like, I would never start my comics.
Yeah.
If I worked like you, I would not be making comics. I would not. There's no way. I would never get to a point where I'd be like, I know enough. Like, because I'm stupid. I don't know what's going to happen in my own stupid story. Like, I have to just jump in with both feet so that I can get momentum so I can go. Otherwise, I never would have started.
I have like one story on the back burner. Well, like only one out of like my maybe 15 story ideas that I'm juggling at any given time that I know everything that happens in it, like specifically, and even then I know I'm gonna change stuff when I finally start working on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just,
especially if it's like something you're not gonna touch for like years from now,
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what changes then?
Because you get that's important. Because you get better at writing. You get better at writing and drawing.
I know that's something that keeps people from wanting. Is the I know I'm gonna get better once I start, but I don't want to have this first project be bad inherently just because them knowing that your first project's not gonna be the best one you may ever make because it's your first comic. You don't know how to make comics. You barely know how to write a story. But don't let that stop you because if you let that stop you from starting, you're not going to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
And who knows, however long your first comic is, who knows? Maybe it'll be really good by the time you get to the end of it. You put in the hours, you're going to get better at something.
And I think that's something kind of interesting and unique to webcomics specifically. And I mean, you see it in other things that print comics that go on for years and years and years with the same artist. You can see style shift. I think particularly in a lot of manga, but style evolution is it's a thing. It's just a thing that's going to happen if you're doing a webcomic for longer than a year. Is that it's just going to change because you're only working on 1 to 3 pages a week, maybe, and that it's too slow, I think, to be incredibly consistent. And I mean, obviously, there are outliers out there. There are people who start their webcomic, and it mostly just looks better now that they've been doing it for years. But
it never looked bad.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's a thing to keep in mind is that that first year is you're gonna look back on it and be not very happy with it, but. Or, maybe you will.
And no matter when you start, though, and how good you think you are, you're going to look back at that first year and be for the rest of your life.
That's just an artist thing.
You just got to get through that year. You just got to get through it. It's fine. It's okay. You're telling the story, and that's more than other people can say. You're making a comic, man. Just do it.
It exists.
And to be fair, the only person that it's really going to irk, if anybody, is usually yourself. Well, most people don't really care that much. If there's a good story with fun characters, they're going to be yeah, I'm all for this.
Gotta remember, not everybody's an artist.
Yeah.
Most of the people reading your webcomic aren't artists. They don't care. Even the artists reading your webcomic, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's just you. It's only you.
It's all in your head.
Do we want to talk about hosting websites at all on this things to think about when starting out episode?
Oh, man.
Ooh, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Where are you going to put your webcomic? You've done it. You've put the work in. You've been writing it. Wow, you're ready to go. Where are you going to put it?
Where are you going to put it, kiddo? The internet's a big place. People, you can make your own website, which that's something I'm currently looking into to build one to host webcomics. But I think you can use hosting sites around IMO. I started with Smack Jeeves. Good old Smack Jeeves. And I mean, all of us are hosting on Tapastic. That's where all of our comics are currently. So
that's true. Another place I've heard a lot of people suggest is actually Tumblr.
There's a lot of people.
There's actual Tumblr links there.
And the webcomic theme you can get for a Tumblr blog is pretty good. I think the most recent version of it has changed from a little bit. The only reason I stopped hosting on Tumblr is because at one point they booted a lot of people with old emails out and were sign in to change your password and stuff, and it was from a dead email, so I had to just stop updating, and I didn't have the heart to go through and making another Tumblr, so that's what made me switch to Tapastic entirely. But I know a lot of people do host their webcomics on Tumblr. Tapastic is a really nice place for beginners. I think for if you don't know, if you're like me and you don't know anything about coding a website and you don't know anything about I actually couldn't do Smack Jeeves because I got a Smack Jeeves account and it was too complicated for my dumb brain. I was like, no thank you. Tapastic, at the cost of a little bit of creativity, I would say, with your profile page, it's a really nice place. And the subscription system is actually really nice. It'll save your place on webcomics you're reading. It has a comment system built in. There's like a lot of good stuff about Tapastic if you're like, I have no idea where to put my webcomic online.
I think Tapastic is a really good place to get eyes on your comics too. Like I know like people who they have their own websites to host their comics. Just they have their own sites, but they still went and made an account on Tapastic and they hosted on Tapastic too. Because like straight up, it's a huge site with a lot of people and a lot of eyeballs, and like that's just an easy way to get people to look at your stuff. Like it's just a nice resource. They're like, oh yeah, look, boom, there it is. Got a bunch of new people looking at my stuff. It's very easy.
The other thing I've always also really liked about it was the fact that they actually kind of updated with the times and made a mobile app for it. Like I actually use it. I kind of pick it up and just flip through some of my comics I'm reading while I'm booting the boot, and it's also
honestly,
good for just checking up on my comments.
Honestly, the mobile app is the superior version of that site. Like the desktop version, it's so rough. It's so rough. It's like hard to read really long backlogs on the Tapastic desktop, but like it's easy on the app. Like it's nice and all just right there. It loads really quick, but their site is not as good. I wish they put in a preloader. Dang it! It's functional. It works. Like it's fine. I mean, I've got Tapastic is fine. I like it a lot better than SmackG's from when I was using it.
I'm like fingers crossed for like a cast page implement somehow. That would like make. I know some people don't.
Yes.
Some people don't like cast pages because they're, they can sometimes have spoilers for the webcomics and stuff. It's usually the first thing I look at because I'm all about some character-driven narratives and I want to know who the characters I'm going to be following are. So, Tapastic, if you're listening, like a cast page option would just be like sweet, my guy.
Please,
Mr. Tapastic.
Mr. Tapastic.
But I think we all ultimately are. I think everyone in the end is ultimately, or at least usually, aiming for their own website.
That's my dream.
Yes, that's the end goal, isn't it?
My dream is to have a site that's like MS Painted stories. Like it's just all of them, just in one place for free. And I'm like, that's what I want to make. That's what I want eventually. The goal.
Your own little portal.
Yeah.
I personally just like designing things, so it's like, oh, if I could design my own website,
Jeff, come design my website for me, please.
Yeah, no, seriously.
You know
I hate designing.
I will do it. I will do it.
I can draw all day
Tell
long.
me when.
I just can't design anything for garbage.
It's time to roll up my sleeves. I went to school for this.
or coding, really. I don't know jack about websites. I need someone to come in and be like, build it for me and then be like, this is how you use it, old person. Like like, thank you, youngster, for designing my website.
Oh man. No, I never even like, you know what? The one website I've ever made like that was outside of school was an HTML website.
Oof.
And no one even uses it anymore. Not that HTML, that's old code. That shows how old I am right now.
See, no, I didn't even know HTML is outdated. What is that?
Well,
man.
The version of it is the version I know. Everything's CSS now, man. CSS everywhere.
See, now that's just gibberish to me. That's just nonsense.
I have a vague understanding of what.
You know, we're gonna have a talk later about this. We'll save it for another time. We'll save it for a different topic.
This isn't a coding podcast, it's a webcomic podcast.
Get this math nerd stuff out of here.
Let me tell you about Java.
Oh, please no. Please don't.
Oh, man. How long have we been going?
I don't know.
I didn't look at the clock. And I don't know if XSplit's got a little timer on it. And this can all be edited out. Might not be.
If you're listening to this right now, you know we're professionals. Totally.
We're not. Let's not even pretend that we're professionals. We're just webcomic creators who are trying really hard. We're just trying to make it for the kids. Like, we're just like you.
Yeah.
We come from a place of understanding.
And we also want a place to talk about comics.
Yeah, I love comics.
I think we've succeeded in that today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job, us.
Good job, kids.
Oh wow. I'm patting y'all on the back.
I'm trying to think if there's anything maybe crucial we missed in order to starting your webcomic. I think the plan is, if you are listening to this, we're gonna have a Twitter for this at some point. Yes, where you'll be able to ask questions based on. I think this might be for something off the air, talking about future topics for future episodes. We have a lot of stuff that we do want to talk about. We have like a whole bunch of things related to comics and narratives and being an online content creator that we're really excited to talk about, and hopefully we'll have a Twitter where you can send in your specific questions about it, and future episodes might not be so freeform jazz all about the questions you don't take.
Yeah, it'd be stop.
You just had to throw in the freeform jazz.
Yeah, you just had to. You couldn't resist. I think it'd be really nice to. I mean, because we make comics, and we have our own. We've been making them for long enough that we've formed our own opinions about it. But it's kind of hard to know what would somebody who has never made a comic be asking. Because we've found those answers for ourselves already. So what were the questions I was asking? What were they? I don't remember. It was friggin' 3 years ago. So yeah, that'd be really good to have what do you guys think about things so that we can talk about that. Give advice, sage advice from a old crotchety webcomic creator.
Oh, that's what it feels like some days. Speaking of comics we make, we have a little segment here. I'm shameless. I'm sorry.
This segment's about to be self-serving and shameless, but bear with us for a second.
We would like to recommend a comic, at least one, every week, as we every time we update this. I don't know if it's every week or not, but every time we actually will end this podcast.
Webcomic recommendations.
Have a webcomic recommendation for you every time at the end of this podcast, but we weren't sure what to pick this week, so hey guys, let's share what we do. Hey Brent, what do you have to recommend?
Oh gee, well, a comic I'm really into right now is Backlash.
F you.
Backlash, which Amber does, is very good. I don't know if I could even tell you what the premise is, really. We started with the most confusing one. But there's cool space monsters, and there's character designs that I love, and there's really tense conversations between horrible giant cyclopses and shady witches, and there's jokes. There's a lot of jokes, and it's very funny. I love it a lot.
I'm freaking dying. Thank you. Shucks. Hey Jeff, what's a comic you really like?
Well, Amber, I'm glad you asked. I would like to talk about a certain little fun webcomic I've been reading lately called Paradise by a certain NeonJawbone. Let me tell you about Paradise. All right, let me give you the skinny. Now, do you like superpowers? Do you like buddy cop stories? Do you like buff ladies with sharp teeth? Well, let me tell you, there's the comic for you right now. It's called Paradise, and it's about all those things and more. Also, lots of jokes.
Really good.
Many jokes.
Really good characters.
Many jokes.
Brent's got a really good comic. You should read it.
Man.
Also, great colors.
Yes! Oh!
You're NeonJawbone for a reason, my dude.
So good.
Thank you. I'm covering my face with my hand right now a little bit. Amber,
Mission successful.
Yeah.
do you have a comic you want to recommend this week?
Oh boy, do I have a comic to recommend.
Oh no.
Well, I'm really excited too because this comic just recently started updating again. Firearm with a Y by our very own Jeff is a really good webcomic, and Jeff has just. I've said this before. I'm gonna say it again. It feels like I'm reading a published printed comic.
Mm-hmm.
Your layouts and colors are just so stupidly good. They're really good. I love the characters. I love all the designs. It's just eye candy. It's just a really good comic, and I'm really excited for where it's going. You should check it out.
And listen, Jeff draws rocks like nobody on this planet
Oh my
draws
gosh!
rocks. Holy shit! The desert scenery in this in Firearm is like so good.
Gets you a man that loves you as much as Jeff loves drawing rocks.
That's I think the most honest thing we can say about Firearm. I love it. Oh man,
Rocks. Some really good rocks.
Some really choice rocks.
real choice rocks. Man, good segment. I feel good about that segment.
That was good.
I think that's gonna do it for us.
Good work, team.
All right.
Until next time, I'm Brent.
Oh, I'm Amber.
Any of you can go next. I have to come up with an order.
We have fun here.
And it's in speech bubbles. And remember,
Good night.
we do this for free.
We do this for
Good night,
free.
everybody. Let me out, Charles!